The scene opens on a large, imposing courtroom, its towering walls adorned with traditional symbols of justice. The atmosphere is thick with a palpable tension, a silence broken only by the occasional rustle of papers or the shuffling of feet. Sunlight streams through tall, arched windows, casting long, dramatic shadows across the polished wooden floor. At the center of this solemn space sits Judge Robert Whitaker, a man whose very presence commands respect and fear in equal measure. His silver hair is neatly combed back, and his sharp, piercing eyes scan the room from behind a pair of rimless glasses. Known throughout the district as a stern and unyielding figure, Judge Whitaker has built a reputation for his harsh judgments and unwavering adherence to the letter of the law. His gavel rests heavily on the bench, a symbol of the authority he wields without hesitation. In stark contrast, standing confidently at the defense table is attorney Maya Thompson. She exudes a quiet strength, her composed demeanor underscoring years of hard-earned respect in the legal community. Maya is impeccably dressed, her tailored suit a testament to her professionalism and attention to detail. Despite the judge's formidable reputation, she meets his gaze with unwavering resolve. Her reputation precedes her, known for her meticulous preparation and fierce advocacy. She is a beacon of hope for many who have found themselves in the clutches of the justice system. The tension in the room mounts as the case begins. All eyes are on Maya as she rises to her feet, a folder of meticulously organized documents in hand. With a deep breath, she begins to present her plea, a well-constructed argument on behalf of her client, whose future hangs precariously in the balance. Every word is chosen with precision, every point backed by compelling evidence and legal precedent. Judge Whitaker listens, his expression inscrutable. His fingers tap lightly on the desk, an almost imperceptible rhythm that betrays his critical evaluation of every word spoken. The courtroom is still, the audience on edge, sensing the importance of the moment. Maya's voice is steady, her argument clear and compelling. She outlines the facts of the case, weaving a narrative that underscores the injustice her client has faced and the dire consequences that await if the plea is not granted. Her passion for justice is evident, but she remains professional, her demeanor a perfect blend of empathy and legal acumen. As she concludes her initial argument, there is a brief pause, a moment of silence that seems to stretch for eternity. All eyes turn to Judge Whitaker, awaiting his response. The weight of his impending decision hangs heavily in the air, a silent testament to the power he holds within these walls. The introduction sets the stage for a confrontation that will test the very fabric of justice with two formidable forces, one representing the rigid authority of the law and the other the relentless pursuit of fairness. About to clash in a battle that will leave no one unchanged. Judge Whitaker leans forward slightly, his fingers interlaced as he contemplates Maya's plea. The courtroom remains deathly silent, every individual holding their breath, awaiting his response. His eyes narrow, scanning Maya with a scrutinizing gaze that has intimidated many before her. But Maya stands firm, her expression calm, her confidence unshaken. Ms. Thompson, the judge's voice finally breaks the silence, deep and authoritative, echoing through the courtroom. While your argument is thorough, I find it lacks the substance required to sway this court. His words are measured, deliberate, and carry an unmistakable undertone of condescension. Maya's brow furrows ever so slightly, but she quickly regains her composure. This isn't her first time facing adversity in the courtroom, and it certainly won't be her last. She takes a step forward, her voice calm but resolute. Your Honor, she begins, her tone respectful yet firm. If I may, the evidence presented clearly demonstrates the need for leniency. My client has already faced significant hardship due to circumstances beyond their control. The law provides for discretion in such cases, and I respectfully urge the court to consider the full context. Judge Whitaker raises a hand, cutting her off mid-sentence. His expression remains stoic, but there is a glint of something, perhaps irritation or disdain, in his eyes. Ms. Thompson, he says sharply, the court is not here to be swayed by emotional appeals. We deal in facts and evidence, not sentiment. The law is clear, and I intend to uphold it. The tension in the room thickens. Maya takes a deep breath, her eyes briefly closing as she gathers her thoughts. She knew this wouldn't be easy, but she is determined not to back down. She adjusts her stance, her voice gaining a slight edge of urgency. Your Honor, with all due respect, the facts and evidence I've presented today are precisely what support my plea. The legal precedents I've cited align perfectly with the situation at hand. I implore the court to re-examine the material before making a final judgment. Judge Whitaker's face remains impassive, but his tapping fingers have stopped, replaced by a cold, unwavering stare. The courtroom is frozen in this moment of intense standoff. Two seasoned professionals locked in a battle of wills, each refusing to yield. The judge leans back in his chair, his lips pressing into a thin line. His decision looms over the courtroom like a dark cloud, and the spectators can feel the weight of his authority bearing down. He clears his throat, a prelude to the inevitable verdict that will shape the course of the day's proceedings. Without looking up, he picks up his gavel and the room collectively holds its breath, knowing that the next words he utters could alter the trajectory of a life. The air in the courtroom feels thick, suffocating as Judge Whitaker picks up his gavel. His eyes sweep the room one last time before settling on Maya, who stands resolutely at the defense table, her hands resting lightly on the polished surface. For a moment, the world seems to hold its breath, the anticipation almost unbearable. "This court has heard enough," Judge Whitaker declares, his voice cutting through the silence like a knife. He straightens in his chair, his expression cold and unyielding. "While I acknowledge the effort put forth by the defense, I find the arguments presented today to be insufficient to warrant a deviation from standard sentencing guidelines." He pauses, allowing his words to sink in, the weight of his authority pressing down on everyone present. His next statement comes with a sharp edge, one that cuts deeper than any previous remark. "Frankly, Miss Thompson," he continues, his tone laced with condescension, "your plea lacks the depth and legal merit required to persuade this court. It is clear that you have allowed personal sentiment to cloud your professional judgment. This is not the place for emotional appeals. This is a court of law, and I will not be swayed by theatrics." The gavel falls with the resounding crack echoing throughout the chamber. The sound signals the finality of his decision, leaving no room for further argument. Maya stands there, absorbing the sting of his words, the gravity of the rejection settling heavily on her shoulders. Despite the blatant dismissal, Maya's expression remains composed. She doesn't flinch, though the pain of the injustice is evident in the brief flicker of her eyes. Her lips pressed together in a thin line, her hands clenching slightly on the edge of the table. The room is silent once more, but the tension is palpable, an unspoken acknowledgement of the bias that has colored the judge's ruling. The clients and spectators watch her closely, waiting for a reaction that never comes. Instead, Maya takes a slow, deliberate breath, her posture unwavering. She gathers her documents with practiced precision, every movement controlled and measured. This is not the first time she has faced such prejudice, and though it stings, she refuses to let it break her. Judge Whitaker's gaze lingers on her for a moment longer, as if expecting a rebuttal, a show of defiance. But Maya offers none. She lifts her chin slightly, meeting his eyes with a calm, steady gaze that speaks volumes. It's a silent declaration that despite his ruling, she will not be defeated by his bias. The courtroom begins to stir, the audience whispering among themselves, exchanging glances filled with disbelief and sympathy. Maya gathers her things, her face a mask of professionalism, but within, the emotional weight of the moment is undeniable. She knows the stakes for her client, the injustice of what has just transpired, and yet she maintains her composure, determined not to let the judge see the impact of his words. As she turns to leave, the camera lingers on her, capturing the depth of her resolve. Her steps are deliberate, each one a testament to her inner strength. She exits the courtroom, her head held high, a quiet dignity in her stride that commands respect, even in the face of blatant injustice. The emotional impact of the rejection is profound. It's a stark reminder of the systemic biases that still permeate the justice system, a harsh reality that Maya is all too familiar with. Yet, it's also a testament to her resilience, her refusal to let such prejudices define her or her career. Outside the courtroom, Maya pauses for a moment, the weight of the day's events pressing down on her. She closes her eyes briefly, collecting herself before stepping into the next phase of her journey. The battle may have been lost, but the war for justice is far from over. The turning point has been reached, a climactic rejection that not only showcases the entrenched bias within the system, but also sets the stage for the ultimate revelation and confrontation that will redefine the power dynamics at play. The echoes of the courtroom gavel still linger in Judge Whitaker's mind as he walks briskly down the marble hallway of the courthouse. The afternoon sun filters through the tall windows, casting long shadows that dance on the polished floors. His mind races, the tension from the morning's proceedings clinging to him like an unwelcome specter. As he approaches, she holds out a folded piece of paper, her hand trembling ever so slightly. "Judge Whitaker," she says, her voice tinged with urgency, "you've been summoned to an immediate meeting with the Judicial Review Board. It's scheduled for this afternoon, sir." The judge's brow furrows in confusion. The review board? Why now? His schedule hadn't mentioned any such meeting. He takes the paper, unfolding it with deliberate care. "What?" His eyes scan the brief but formal message, and a flicker of annoyance crosses his face. "Very well," he mutters, tucking the paper into his pocket. "Inform them I'll be there shortly." The clerk nods, retreating quickly down the hall, leaving the judge alone with his thoughts. Whitaker stands for a moment, considering the unexpected summons. The review board meetings were rare and typically reserved for matters of significant importance or concern. He dismisses any thoughts of worry. After all, he's been a pillar of this institution for years, his record spotless and his reputation formidable. With a confident stride, he makes his way to the administrative wing. The corridor is quieter now, the usual bustle of courthouse activity subdued. The door to the boardroom looms ahead, a stark reminder of the authority that even judges must occasionally answer to. Whitaker pauses before the door, adjusting his robes, smoothing out any sign of disarray. He takes a deep breath, his hand resting on the ornate brass handle. With a firm push, the door swings open, revealing the boardroom bathed in soft, natural light. The room is large, its walls lined with bookshelves filled with legal tomes. A long, polished table dominates the space, around which several board members are already seated. Their faces are calm, their eyes tracking the judge as he enters. But it's not their gazes that capture his attention. It's the figure seated at the head of the table. There, poised with an air of undeniable authority, sits attorney Maya Thompson, the same woman whose plea he had so coldly rejected just hours ago. The shock is immediate and profound, his eyes widening ever so slightly as the weight of the revelation hits him. Maya meets his gaze with a calm, collected expression, her hands resting lightly on the table before her. There is no trace of the tension from the courtroom, only a quiet confidence that now seems almost regal in this setting. The room falls into a charged silence, the other board members watching the interaction with keen interest. Judge Whitaker hesitates for a fraction of a second, his composure faltering. He clears his throat, the sound awkward in the otherwise silent room, and steps forward with a practiced neutrality that masks the turmoil roiling beneath the surface. "Mrs. Thompson," he says, his voice carefully measured. "I wasn't aware you were serving on the review board." Maya's lips curve into a slight, knowing smile. "Chairwoman of the review board, Your Honor," she corrects gently, her tone respectful but firm. "I was appointed earlier this year. We've called this meeting to discuss some pressing matters regarding judicial conduct." The judge's mind races, piecing together the implications of her words. The very woman he had dismissed with condescension now holds a position of oversight and accountability over him. The balance of power has shifted dramatically, and he can feel the weight of it pressing down on him. Maya gestures to the empty seat across from her, her eyes never leaving his. "Please, have a seat, Judge Whitaker. We have much to discuss." Whitaker moves slowly, each step measured as he approaches the table. He lowers himself into the chair, his hands resting stiffly on his lap. The atmosphere is thick with unspoken tension, the roles reversed in a way he never could have anticipated. As Maya begins to outline the agenda, her voice steady and professional, Whitaker's mind drifts back to the courtroom, to the dismissive words he had thrown her way. The irony is not lost on him, and for the first time in his career, he feels a twinge of uncertainty, a realization that his actions have consequences far beyond the immediate rulings he delivers. The meeting unfolds with meticulous precision, Maya leading the discussion with the same composure and authority she had displayed in the courtroom, but now the power dynamics have shifted entirely. Whitaker sits in silence, absorbing the gravity of the situation, aware that this encounter will mark a pivotal moment in his career. The unveiling of the twist leaves the judge reeling, a stark reminder that justice is not just about the decisions made in the courtroom, but also about accountability and the moral integrity of those who wield such power. Maya Thompson sits at the head of the table, her posture commanding and her expression composed. The atmosphere in the boardroom is formal, yet the tension from the earlier courtroom encounter still lingers heavily in the air. Judge Whitaker, seated across from her, shifts slightly in his chair, his usual confidence replaced by a palpable discomfort. The roles have clearly reversed, and it is Maya who now holds the authority. Maya begins the meeting with a calm, professional tone, addressing the members of the Judicial Review Board and then turning her attention directly to Judge Whitaker. Judge Whitaker, she starts, her voice steady and measured, we convened this meeting to discuss concerns that have been brought to our attention regarding your recent conduct on the bench. Specifically, we are here to address allegations of judicial bias and the potential impact of such behavior on the integrity of the court. Whitaker's jaw tightens, but he remains silent, listening intently. The other board members sit in quiet observation, their eyes fixed on the judge, their expressions neutral yet attentive. Maya continues, her words carefully chosen, her demeanor professional yet firm. As you know, the role of a judge is to uphold the law impartially, ensuring that justice is administered fairly and without prejudice. However, it has come to our attention that your recent rulings, including the one earlier today, may reflect a pattern of bias that undermines public confidence in the judicial system. She pauses, allowing the weight of her words to sink in. The room is silent, save for the faint hum of the air conditioning. Whitaker shifts again, his discomfort now evident in the slight furrowing of his brow. In particular, Maya continues, her eyes meeting his with a piercing gaze. Your dismissal of legitimate legal arguments presented by defense attorneys, particularly those from minority backgrounds, raises serious concerns. It suggests a predisposition to disregard certain perspectives, which is inconsistent with the principles of fairness and equality enshrined in our legal system. Whitaker's face remains stoic, but the inner turmoil is clear in his eyes. He had prided himself on his strict adherence to the law, yet hearing these words, he cannot deny the validity of the concerns being raised. Maya's voice softens slightly, though her tone remains firm. Judge Whitaker, we understand that unconscious biases can influence decisions, but it is our duty as officers of the court to recognize and address these biases to maintain the integrity of the judiciary. Today's hearing is not only about holding you accountable, but also about offering an opportunity for reflection and improvement. The judge's fingers tighten around the armrests of his chair. His mind races, replaying the moments from the courtroom, the condescending tone he had used, the dismissive nature of his comments. He begins to see how his actions, viewed through the lens of those affected, could be interpreted as biased, even if unintended. Maya's words continue to resonate deeply as she outlines the potential repercussions of his behavior. These patterns continue, they could lead to formal disciplinary actions, including potential suspension or even removal from the bench. However, our goal is not punitive but corrective. We believe in the potential for growth and change, even for those who have served as long as you have. Whitaker swallows hard, the realization hitting him with full force. His career, his reputation, everything he has worked for is now under scrutiny. The implications of his actions extend beyond his own future. They affect the very fabric of justice and the lives of those who come before his court. For the first time in years, Whitaker feels a sense of vulnerability. The room seems to close in around him, the walls of authority he had built now feeling more like a cage. He takes a deep breath, his gaze falling to the polished table before him, reflecting on the gravity of the situation. Maya's voice softens further, though it remains resolute. Judge Whitaker, we are not here to condemn, but to guide. Recognizing our biases is the first step towards ensuring that justice is truly blind. We hope that you will take this opportunity to reflect, to learn, and to recommit yourself to the principles of fairness and impartiality. The room remains silent as her words hang in the air, their impact undeniable. Whitaker finally looks up, his eyes meeting hers with a newfound humility. He nods slowly, acknowledging the truth of her statements, the weight of his responsibilities now clearer than ever. This professional exchange marks a pivotal moment of confrontation and realization for Judge Whitaker. The once unyielding figure now sits humbled, his understanding of justice and his own role within it forever changed by the words of the woman he had so readily dismissed. As the meeting draws to a close, Whitaker rises from his seat, his posture no longer rigid with authority, but softened by the weight of introspection. The journey towards redemption has only just begun, but the seeds of change have been planted. Maya watches him leave, a quiet satisfaction in knowing that justice has taken its first step towards true impartiality. The room is heavy with a quiet intensity as the members of the Judicial Review Board gather their thoughts. The meeting has shifted from a formal hearing to a moment of reflection, the weight of the decision they are about to make resting heavily on everyone present. Judge Whitaker, though still outwardly composed, is acutely aware of the gravity of the situation. He has heard the criticisms, felt the sting of their accuracy, and now the moment of reckoning is upon him. Maya Thompson, sitting at the head of the table, remains calm and poised. She does not show the relief or satisfaction one might expect after confronting such a powerful figure, for she understands that the true victory is not merely the acknowledgement of the judge's bias, but the larger issue of systemic bias within the judicial system itself. She sits, unwavering, watching the board's deliberations unfold. The chair of the board, an experienced judge himself with decades of service, looks over at Judge Whitaker. His voice is firm, but there is no malice in it, only the sternness of someone committed to maintaining the integrity of the justice system. Judge Whitaker, the chair begins, his words measured, we have reviewed your recent conduct, as well as the concerns brought forward today. After careful deliberation, it is clear that your actions, especially your treatment of Attorney Thompson, reflect a pattern of behavior that compromises the fairness of the judicial process. Whitaker shifts in his seat, the tension in his shoulders palpable. His eyes flicker toward Maya, whose face remains neutral but unwavering. He can feel the judgment of the room closing in on him, a realization that he is not above scrutiny, not immune to accountability. The chair continues, his tone now more resolute. While we acknowledge your long service to this court and your contributions to the legal community, we cannot overlook the systemic issues that have been highlighted by your conduct. It is essential that judges, who hold significant power over the lives of others, exemplify the highest standards of impartiality and fairness. Whitaker's throat tightens. He knows what's coming next, but it doesn't make it any easier to hear. As such, the chair announces, we have decided that your actions will be subject to a temporary suspension pending further investigation. The severity of your misconduct, specifically your biased treatment of Ms. Thompson's client and your failure to engage with the evidence presented, requires that we take swift action. A murmur ripples through the room, the board members exchanging brief glances. The decision has been made, and while the outcome is not as severe as it could have been, it is a decisive step in holding the judge accountable for his actions. Whitaker's face remains stoic, but there is a flicker of recognition in his eyes. He understands that this suspension is not just a penalty, it's a moment of introspection, a turning point in his career and personal understanding of justice. Maya, for her part, remains composed throughout the proceedings, her posture unyielding as she listens. She had expected this decision, but even still, it does not diminish the significance of the moment. It is not simply a win for her, it is a win for justice, for her client, for every individual who has faced bias within the courtroom. It is a small but meaningful victory in the ongoing fight for equity and fairness in the judicial system. When the chair concludes the announcement, the room falls silent once again, the decision now set in motion. He turns to Maya, offering her a nod of respect. She doesn't respond verbally, but allows a brief, composed smile to touch her lips. There is no need for further words. The victory is in the result, not in celebration. The journey towards systemic change is long and complicated, but this moment feels like a step in the right direction. Last but not least, Sue's letter was included in the letter to the editor. By the way, Maya, were you freaking bumped on your letter? The chair then turns to the board, signaling the end of the meeting, but before they can adjourn, Maya rises from her seat. The room watches her as she steps forward with purpose, her eyes not on Whitaker, but on the larger issue at hand. Ladies and gentlemen, Maya's voice rings out, steady and strong. This is a moment of accountability for one individual, but let us not forget that this is part of a much larger conversation about the biases that are still rampant in our system. Judge Whitaker's actions, though reprehensible, are not unique. There are countless other instances, both in this courthouse and across the nation, where people of color are judged by different standards simply because of their race. She pauses, allowing her words to settle in the minds of the board members, the room now holding its collective breath. The issue is not just with one judge. It's a systemic issue that runs deep within the very fabric of our legal system. We must ask ourselves, what are we doing to address these biases on a larger scale? What steps are we taking to ensure that every individual who enters this courtroom is judged not by the color of their skin, but by the merits of their case? Her voice doesn't rise in anger, but there is an unmistakable passion in her words. She is not just speaking to the board members. She is speaking to everyone who has ever felt the sting of discrimination in the halls of justice. Her words are a call to action, a reminder that this is not the end of the journey, but only the beginning of a much-needed reckoning. The room falls into a thoughtful silence. Maya's message resonates deeply, leaving a lingering impression on everyone present. The board members nod slowly, reflecting on the broader implications of her words. It is a sobering moment, one that underscores the importance of continuous reflection, education, and change within the justice system. As the meeting officially adjourns, Judge Whitaker quietly exits the room. His mind is a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts, but for the first time, there is an openness to change, a willingness to confront his own biases. He knows that the path ahead will be difficult, but he is no longer the man. The video closes with a final reflection, narrated over scenes of the courthouse at sunset, the last light of the day casting long shadows across the stone steps. The narrator's voice is calm, reflective. Justice is not a static concept. It is a living, breathing force that must be nurtured and protected. It requires those in positions of power to remain vigilant, to confront their own biases, and to hold themselves accountable for their actions. The judiciary must be a place where fairness prevails, where every person is judged impartially, and where the integrity of the system is never compromised. Today, we witnessed a small but significant step toward that ideal. But the journey is far from over. As we reflect on this case, we are reminded that justice is a constant process of reflection, growth, and accountability. Only through these efforts can we ensure that the courts truly serve all people, not just some. The video fades to black, the final words lingering in the minds of viewers as the screen transitions to credits. The tube trains continue to trickle back in the background as we turn my attention to the stage.